Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to Saturday Night Dhamma. We don't have any meditators here, so normally I would maybe think not to broadcast, but today is a special day. Yesterday was the full moon, and that marks the anniversary of the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, when the Buddha first taught. Because up until that point, after the Buddha's enlightenment, there was only one person who understood the teaching. That was the Buddha. Understood the truth. There was only one enlightened being in the world. Only one arahant. But with the teaching that we're commemorating yesterday and today, someone else understood the teaching. The truth was spread to someone else. It's called the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma because it's the first teaching. And it's the change from there being no teaching to being a teaching of the truth. Meaning that from that point on, more people would learn. If the Buddha had never taught anyone, it would have died with him. But as soon as he taught one person, something was set in motion. He would teach many other people, but even the person he taught would also spread the teachings to others. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this and about today as well, which is the first day of the rains, which is also another important part of Buddhist culture. So for the next 3 months, I'm stuck in this one place. Not that I really ever go anywhere anyway, but I'm not generally allowed to spend a night anywhere else, but there are exceptions. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But first I thought I'd sort of address this question, which I think is an important question. Why celebrate anything at all? It may seem like a poor question, but I think it's an important one. I think there are certainly probably people who follow me who have no use for Buddhist holidays. The holiday, they don't have any use for Buddhism. They have a use for the teachings, the meditation teachings, but Buddhist, no. They just want what's useful. And I'm not ridiculing that. I think that's important. It's an important position. Only take what's useful. The problem sometimes is that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We throw out what's useful. More precisely, we have an overly narrow definition of what's useful. So we'll say, I only want meditation. Is that enough? No, I think it's overly narrow. These sorts of people anyone who thinks like that will have difficulty progressing in meditation because they're missing things. Mainly how to live your life. And living your life, that sort of the activities that surround the meditation practice, that support it, is bound up by things like, well, culture really. was thinking about this idea of culture. A holiday is a Buddhist culture. The rains, this custom of spending 3 months, it's just a custom. It's not even raining here, not today. And it won't rain very much in the next 3 months. Not any more than it does the rest of the year. Why bother? Why should we care, right? Why should we adopt customs that are antiquated and regional and often just useless, right? Useless seeming. Could there be some use to them? I think the answer is that there's no reason for us to particularly pick yesterday. There's nothing relating to yesterday. There's nothing relating yesterday to the day when the Buddha is supposed to have taught his first teaching. We're told that it was on a day when the moon happened to be in a specific alignment with the sun and the earth. But what does that mean? It means nothing, really. It's totally circumstantial and meaningless, theoretically. I suppose you could argue that there's something about the stars and how they affect gravity and how there's some sort of mystical, horoscope and that sort of thing. Something to do with the tides, maybe, that the moon has an effect on people. Apparently it does. Full moon. But beyond that, very little meaning. So it's down to culture. But I think the point is, we could have picked any day. We could pick April 4th, just pick some date at random. And then say, this is the day when we're going to do this thing. So the question becomes whether the thing that we do on this day is useful. But we have another problem. Because suppose we have this thing that we do yesterday, or we do on the Buddha's, or on Asalha Puja, on the full moon of Asalha. Suppose we have this thing we do, and suppose it is useful. Suppose it is helpful. But instead we do it on a day that has no reference to anything, where we can't claim that this is the same full moon, then we diminish the power of whatever it is we're doing, psychologically. Because that's what we're talking about. We're not doing this because, there's another reason, I suppose. It may very well be that the angels up in heaven and other beings in other realms are also doing this. It certainly is that beings all around the world at this time of year are human beings, are thinking about the Buddha and his first teaching. So there's this camaraderie there, which certainly has a psychological impact on all of us. It changes the way we feel about things. It brings to mind things that it should bring to mind. So there's really the answer. That psychologically, and really that shouldn't be a minimalization of this. It is magic. It's not very different from how we think of this, this holiday as having some special meaning. Well, it does have special meaning. It's just that meaning is, of course, in our minds, and if you want to be poetic, it's in our hearts. But that's really important. From a Buddhist perspective, that's most important. Calling something psychologically beneficial is not a diminishing of its importance, not in Buddhism. It's amplifying its importance. And that's where benefit and that's where purpose comes from. So we choose this date, and the date is important. We do it all together, and we try to find things to do that remind us of the Buddha's teaching and so on. So I thought we'd take a step back and ask ourselves, what is it that we're remembering? What is this day? turning of the wheel of the Dhamma. Well, I've already said it's the first teaching. What is that first teaching, and how did it come to be the first teaching? So to get there, we have to go back in history, and we have to go back in time. I'm not even sure if you could, at this point, I'm not even sure if in this regard you could call it going back in time. Time kind of gets a little bit odd. It definitely is in the past, but it's called 4 uncountable periods of time in the past. Meaning literally it's not possible to count those time periods. Or maybe it's just a figure of speech. But it's definitely the word that's used. A time that is just so vast, it's beyond anything we can comprehend. Or maybe it's just a figure of speech. Just long times. Yeah, well, this is a very long time. Well, 4 of those. That much amount of time ago. And it was the time of the Buddha Dipankara. There have been other Buddhas in the past, and where it's passed down to us that there was a Buddha back then as well. Which isn't surprising. But at the time of this Buddha, there was one man named Sumedha, who was very well developed in meditative practice and attainments. He had all sorts of psychic powers and mental abilities. And he found out that the Buddha was that a Buddha was born, and he was so excited that he thought, "Wow, I'll learn from this Buddha and I'll become enlightened. Here is an enlightened being come to the world." And so he thought he would wait for the Buddha to come, and in the meantime do something. He got in with the people who were doing something to pay homage to the Buddha. They were clearing the path for the Buddha. The Buddha was on his way, and they were making a path for him to come to where he would teach the Dhamma. And the roads, I guess, were not so good, so they were repairing the roads. Something like that. Paving the way, maybe. Maybe there were a lot of Buddhists around, and they were devoted to the Buddha, so they were spreading flowers or whatever. The Buddha was on his way. So Sumedha said to them, can I help? Can I take part in this and pay homage to this being of beings, the special of all beings, the most highest of all beings? And they looked at him and they said, "Wow, this is Sumedha." And he was, I guess, famous, well known for his psychic abilities. And they thought, well, he has great psychic powers. We'll give him the hardest stretch of road to clear, because he'll surely use his psychic powers to do it. So they gave him a swamp, basically. But Sumedha thought to himself, well, I could use my psychic powers to clear this area. He looked at this big swamp, and this is what the Buddha was supposed to be passing through. And he said, well, I could use my psychic powers, but that wouldn't be impressive at all. That would be a trifle. And so he didn't use his psychic powers, and he used just his own hands and tools, manual, sort of primitive tools or whatever he had, and got busy clearing the path by hand. He wasn't able to finish. It was a real mud spot, and so he wasn't able to finish by the time the Buddha had arrived. And so he turned and he looked and he saw the Buddha coming. And here was this muddy patch. But he looked at the Buddha and he realized something. He realized, wow, I'm so ready to hear the Buddha's teaching. just one word from him, one verse, and I'll understand and I'll become enlightened. That's all it would take. He knew he was ready. He saw something. I mean, his mind was so refined. He said, wouldn't that be a waste? Or perhaps not, wouldn't that be a waste, but what if? And he decided, he looked at it a different way. He said, what if I were like this being? What if I were to do what he has done? And he changed his mind. He opened up his mind to a different path. And he made a decision, and he said, I'm not going to go and hear the Buddha speak. I'm going to make a vow myself to become just like him. To give up, to put aside my own happiness, my own peace, to liberate, help other beings become liberated, just as he has done. I mean, someone's got to do it. If he hadn't done it, there would be no Buddhism. I will do this too. And so rather than trying to clear the path for the Buddha, he threw himself in the mud, lay down in the path, sacrificed his body, knowing full well the Buddha was being followed by like 500 monks. And they were all going to trample over him. He knew that, he expected that his body would be crushed. He threw himself down, literally making himself a pathway, using his body as a pathway. Not just a symbol, but actually giving up his life. Making a determination that with this great gift, this great sacrifice, this symbolic sacrifice, actually, looking at it, it isn't that big of a deal because the Buddha, worst case, he gets his feet a little muddy, but the symbolism of it is quite poetic. With the power of this gesture, may I become a Buddha, just as he has done. And the Buddha approached, saw this Sumedha, this ascetic, squelching in the mud, looked down at him, and turned to his monks and said, do you see this ascetic lying here, face down in the mud? In 4 uncountable periods of time and 100,000 great eons. Now, the great eons are huge amounts of time that are much, much smaller than the uncountable period. So a lot of time. This ascetic will become the Buddha Gautama. He'll become a Buddha. And then, did he walk over him and crush him, and all the monks walk over him? No. Buddhas don't do such things. He walked around him, squelched through the mud or so on, I don't know. And went on his way. And Sumedha just lay there, and he thought, did he just say what I think he said? And his body was suffused with rapture, and he got up from the mud and left, went in the opposite direction, didn't follow after the Buddha, had made up his mind. Here was the opportunity to become enlightened, and he turned it down. Went on his way to become a Buddha. It's a noble thing. It's a wonderful thing. It may sound like I'm praising this, trying to imply that this is what we all should be doing. And probably some people who are listening to me right now are thinking, wow, that's what I'm going to do. That's not what I'm trying to do. So my caveat is that according to the commentaries, the question is posed, wait a minute, was Sumedha the only one in the crowd who thought, boy, I'd like to be I'm going to become a Buddha as well? The commentary answers, no. No, in fact, many people that day were of that opinion, thinking, I will become a Buddha as well. But none of them got the reassurance from the Buddha. None of them were like Sumedha. Not a single one of them was anywhere near his position, such that the Buddha could say with reassurance, this guy is going to become a Buddha. His mind was so developed already. So you think, well, I could develop my mind. But that's not the point. His mind was so developed before he started the longest journey in the universe. You know, if you talk about goals, I mean, goals like going to college or getting a job, it's impossible to compare that to the slightest fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what the Bodhisattva did to become a Buddha. After he had already developed himself so powerfully that he was able to be affirmed by another Buddha. It's a very special thing, not something that should be thrown around or taken lightly or sort of should be recommended to the average person. And most of us are pathetically average. You find a lot of Buddhists who think they're special or think they could be special and try to be very humble about it, but it's kind of what you're saying, you know. If you say, I'm going to become a Buddha, you're kind of saying you're more special than everybody else. From a Theravada point of view anyway. I think there are other traditions that say, well, no, everyone will become Buddha eventually and so on. But that's another can of worms. I don't want to go there. That was just a short note. Let's stop there with that. Sumedha went off into the woods, our hero, and he contemplated, what are the things that I need to do to become a Buddha? And he realized there were 10 things. How he came to 10, don't really know. He was, as we said, a very special person. 10 things, the 10 perfections. I've talked about them recently. We have a video on them recently. I'm not going to go into that. But he realized that he'd have to cultivate certain qualities to their perfection. Perfection, again, I've talked about this, isn't probably the best translation. Parami or paramita means highest, thing which is at its highest degree. So not just giving, but giving to the highest degree. Being totally perfected in giving. Can't possibly be a more committed giver. Perfect in morality, ethics, perfect in renunciation, perfect in effort, perfect in 10 different things. And so he realized, this is what I have to do. I have to develop these. And he spent the rest of his life cultivating them and working on them, and proceeded to do the same thing in various ways and in various lives for the next 4 uncountable eons. That's the story. Is it actually true? Is the time scale actually valid? I'm not in a position to say. Long time, anyway. The point really of that story is to remind us of the big deal, that this isn't just some guy who decided, hey, I'll go off in the woods, and 6 years later, oh, I became enlightened. That's not how Buddhists look at this, and that's not how we should look at it. I know a lot of people are not comfortable with reincarnation or rebirth, this idea, but it's undeniable. I mean, that's really the worldview in Buddhism, that our paths are a lot longer than this, very short and pathetic. existence as human beings. Our life of 70, 80, 90 years, if we're lucky, is nothing. It's just a shot, a frame in the video, a frame in the film of our journey in samsara. A very small part. So, but fast forward to the present, we have the Bodhisattva being born in Lumbini and spending 29 years as a prince, and then realizing that he was going to get old, sick, and die, and that there must be a better way, finding that way, preliminary anyway, of leaving home and becoming an ascetic, and then spending the next 6 years on the wrong path, apparently because he had, in a past existence, ridiculed a Buddha, a Pacceka Buddha actually, apparently, I think, yes. Ridiculed some enlightened being, saying, "Oh, you're torturing yourself. What use is that asceticism of yours, torturing yourself?" And he was very nasty to this enlightened being. As a result of that karma, scary, you know, he spent 6 years when many Buddhas, most Buddhas, after one night, they leave home, next morning they're enlightened. True story. I mean, that's the story. That's what the commentaries say anyway. But the Bodhisattva, our Bodhisattva, had to spend 6 years. After 6 years, he had expiated the karma. The karma had run its course. And he realized, this is useless. What am I doing? So that's kind of an understanding of how karma works. It's not some magical thing. It's that you're messed up in the head. And that messed up in the head stopped. And believe it or not, I mean, this is all subject to questioning. It's the thing about historical facts. You don't have to believe any of this to be practicing Buddhism. It's just past. But again, culture. There's a lot in here, in this story and in this memory, that reminds us of good things, that is psychologically beneficial. It helps us focus. It gives us something to focus on, rather than, hey, look at that statue. It's, hey, that's the Buddha, and I know who he is because I've heard the story. After those 6 years, the Buddha found the way and became enlightened under the Bodhi tree in Gaya. So it's called Buddha Gaya. He spent 49 days in and around, or under and around the area of the Bodhi tree, and then was invited to teach, and tried to figure out who would be the best person to hear his teachings first, and decided that, with some thought, that these five ascetics who he had spent time with in the past 6 years. They were actually four of them were old court astrologers who had predicted that that the Bodhisattva would become either a Buddha or a emperor of the world. And Kondanya predicted that he would become only a Buddha. Or else it was Kondanya's father, and Kondanya's father... No, that's not right. It was Kondanya, wasn't it? I don't remember. The stories are quite involved. At any rate, these five were there they left the Buddha because the Buddha had stopped his asceticism. They thought he was on the wrong path. They left him. And the Buddha went to find them, found them, and taught the Dhammatalk Sutta. And that was last night. So I definitely recommend that you read the sutta. In brief, it's the first teaching of the Four Noble Truths. What that means is that what we're celebrating yesterday, and today if you want, because today is the first day, today is the first day that a commemoration of the first day, or the anniversary of the first day, when the world had the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. It means before that day, only the Buddha knew what the truth of suffering was. And important there is the five aggregates, an understanding of what was real in the world. Because when we talk about suffering, we're talking about what is real. We're not actually talking about suffering in the English sense. We're talking about the reality of things that we cling to and which are to be let go of, which are not capable of satisfying us. I mean, the reality of things. Dukkha is just the Buddha's way of saying, hey, look, the problem isn't any one thing. The problem is things, is the nature of things, that they're not capable of giving us satisfaction. Reality is of a nature unable to provide us with happiness. You can't cling to anything. Clinging is the cause of stress and suffering. The things that we cling to are not capable, do not have the ability to satisfy us. So the cause of suffering is craving, cessation of suffering is letting go of craving, and the path, first day today is the first day we have the Eightfold Noble Path. It's the anniversary of that. So, what do we do today? What do we do to commemorate this? Well, it's the beginning of the rains, and the most important thing is to remember and try and emulate the Eightfold Noble Path. The Eightfold Noble Path is the path by which one comes to realize the Four Noble Truths. Realize in the sense of become aware of the nature of reality. See things so clearly that you stop clinging to them, that you stop being partial, that you stop wanting, that you stop suffering. So the general thing that we would do during the next 3 months, we would take the next 3 months as being a special opportunity, not that we don't do it the rest of the year, but a special opportunity to cultivate the Eightfold Noble Path. In brief, 3 things, the 3 trainings. So we begin today. I've already made my determination. I'll be spending the 3. I spoke in front of the Buddha, the ritual words that determine give my determination that for the next 3 months I will be residing here. But that's not so meaningful. I mean, it's just a tradition, right? The point is, this 3 months, for all of us, should be an opportunity to increase our commitment to the 3 trainings, which is morality. So we be more committed to keeping ethical precepts, not to lie or to cheat or to steal or to kill, take drugs and alcohol. Many people will give up alcohol just for these 3 months. Yes, you should be giving up alcohol entirely, of course, but for some people in some cultures that's difficult. Concentration, the second one, so meditation. People will take up stronger, more intensive meditation practice during this time. Thinking, the Buddha, he put so much work into, can't I at least put in enough work to follow in his footsteps, to learn from his teachings? I don't have to put all the work in to learn them on my own, but I can listen to the Buddha's teaching, and I have listened to the Buddha's teaching, and I can certainly put that into practice. And wisdom. Through the practice, gaining wisdom, learning the truth, coming to understand reality, giving up our wrong views and wrong opinions, letting go of beliefs, letting go of culture, letting go of our adherence to stubborn views and doubts and and habits and so on and so on. Learning the truth of reality. Gaining a perspective that is in line, not even in line with science, because science may be very good at observations, but by very nature, there's so much about it that is reproachable. The slant of science is so biased, relating to money and so on, prestige, ego, and just ignorance and indoctrination. That, not to say that it's actually among the most beautiful things, because it does purport to relate to knowledge. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just corrupt. So, as with everything else, let go of it and try to see for yourself what is real. Not what someone else says, not even within the framework of what they say, but within the framework of reality. Wisdom. That's what the holiday really means. That's what this time, this period means. So, not a very intricate or complicated teaching, but you got a story and a reminder, I think. A little bit of perspective on this day. So thank you all for tuning in. Wish you all a happy Vassa, rains, productive. Today is day 1 of the rains. Have a good night.